Every now and then, we come across incredible stories from people who've lived through strange situations or whose jobs naturally lead them into them, like Halim the journalist, who set out to create a full radio show documenting the most unusual real-life stories. He didn't just report them, he lived them, experiencing every twist firsthand before sharing them with the world. Or Hassan the Gravedigger from Najaf, who still works there to this day, and has become one of my richest sources of unbelievable tales. Stay tuned, you'll be hearing some of those stories very soon. Today, I found a brand new source of stories, and this one straight out of a movie. His name, Sed El Harami. It's not a joke, that's what people actually call him. He told me one of his crazy work stories. When I asked for more, I realized his life is basically a treasure chest of wild stories. But hey, before we go too deep, let me tell you just one thing. His name is Syed, though his last name remains a mystery. What everyone does know, however, is his nickname, Harami, meaning the thief. At 34, Syed is one of the oldest and most infamous burglars in Egypt's Kalubia Governorate. In this first episode, we dive into his unbelievable life. From the strange beginnings of a poor young boy to becoming the Robin Hood of the poor, and then, somehow, turning into one of Egypt's most skilled and unpredictable swindlers. As the story unfolds, he begins to share the haunting tales of his thieving years, stories that chill the blood. Hey man, he'd grin. Swear to God, I've been a thief since I was like 12. I grew up with dozens of fathers, dozens of mothers, and just as many brothers. The reason? Simple. The day I was born, I dragged misfortune into the world. Bad luck's been my shadow ever since. My father, my mother, the midwife who delivered me, her husband, and all of their children, gone. Even several houses of our neighbors vanished in a single instant. Right after my birth. The cause, a gas truck explosion in our neighborhood, the one where the midwife lived. It was a well-known tragedy that happened in 1991, taking dozens of lives. The only strange thing was that I came into this world just minutes before that blast. By the will of God, I survived, while almost everyone else perished. My poor parents, who had waited so eagerly for their first child, were among the victims, and somehow I, the newborn, was the only one spared. I was cared for by one of the women in the neighborhood, and shortly after, another woman took me in. This kept happening. Every few days, a different mother would take care of me, raise me, and love me as her own. To me, they were all my family. But when I turned 12, I began to realize something strange. Everyone who loved and looked after me wasn't actually my real family, and when I asked for the truth, what I learned was exactly what you've just heard, and what followed changed everything. The people who cared for me were poorer than poor, their lives buried deep under the weight of hardship. Still, they'd tear their bread in half and make sure I had my share. True, that's what any decent person would do, a natural act of kindness among noble-hearted Arabs. But I'll never forget when I was 12, sitting among one of the families that looked after me. The mother spoke in a low voice to the father, saying, "Go see if there's anything left. Maybe a loaf of bread we can split among the children." The children she meant were her own, and me. Whether she or her husband had anything to eat didn't matter. What mattered most was that the little ones didn't go hungry. The father had already gone out and returned, his face lit up with joy. He'd managed to get a loaf of bread for free. The mother carefully divided that precious loaf into 3 parts, 2 for her little children and the largest piece for me, probably because I was the eldest. She and my father didn't eat at all. There was simply nothing left for them, yet despite the poverty, they smiled. They were happy. Because we were eating. That day changed something in me. I realized how cruel life could be. So I left the house, determined to change the fate of families like ours. How? I had no idea, but I was only 12 and already smart enough to know I had to try. I started walking away from home, heading toward Cairo. My plan was simple: find any job, save every coin I could, then buy food and feed all the people whose kindness had carried me through life. After walking for hours, I finally reached a dreamlike neighborhood. Vast mansions, lush gardens, and trees more beautiful than anything I'd ever seen. I stood there in awe, turning my head from side to side, mesmerized by those grand villas shining with elegance and splendor, until my feet stopped in front of one of those grand, luxurious houses. What I saw was a party. People dressed in elegant, expensive clothes, men and women alike. Small groups stood talking among themselves, leaving behind what must have been the most precious thing there: a massive table covered with dishes of every color and flavor imaginable, yet no one even looked at it. Beside it stood a row of tall, perfectly arranged plants, lifted slightly off the ground in a neat design. And that's where my first theft happened. Right next to the food table, there was a small decorative cart carrying a plant. I unloaded the plants from the cart and grabbed a whole roasted lamb from the table, still steaming, stuffed with something mysterious, plus strange-looking bread and bits of other food. No one saw me. I loaded everything onto the cart, moved it silently, and escaped. I had to eat first, to gather my strength for the long journey, dragging that cart from Cairo all the way to my old neighborhood. Hours of walking, muscles burning, exhaustion biting deep. Then a farmer crossed my path and lent a hand. When I finally reached home, my family's eyes filled with disbelief and joy. To them, it was as if I had brought home a treasure. They hadn't eaten properly in days. They asked me where it came from. I told them I work in Cairo and I'll bring whatever I can. And my friend, after that theft, I had to find a way to make transportation easier so I could steal at my own pace. I needed something that would let me go to Cairo and back and help with the robbery. So I ended up stealing a donkey and then a whole cart to load my stuff onto. I began slipping into those lavish houses at night, snipping the ornamental plants from their lawns and selling them elsewhere to buy necessities for a needy family. Every few days, I'd have enough money to help the people who had once cared for me. Over time, I got better. I was stealing so smoothly nobody noticed. I even bought clothes to alter my cover, once a janitor's overalls, once a gardener's coat, so people assumed I was there to tend the gardens. I learned the tricks of the street, got tougher, and found the nerve to start stealing things of real value. That was 4 or 6 years into my thieving life. I must have been about 17 then. I watched houses where nobody seemed to care, noticed when things went missing. If the owners left, went out, or traveled somewhere, I'd slip in, browse like a customer, and take whatever caught my eye. Later, I'd sell the loot at the flea market and head back to my town, a kind of Robin Hood for the poor. I took from the wasteful rich and handed out to dozens who needed it. Until one day, I stumbled upon a strange golden statue, something like a flamingo, or maybe an ostrich. I was thrilled by the theft, so much that I left everything behind and ran as fast as I could, eager to sell what was clearly a very valuable piece. Where's the shock, my friend? The statue was practically worthless because it wasn't genuine, merely a counterfeit. So I figured since it looked beautiful, I'd keep it and swipe other things. I'd present that statue as a gift. It looked so grand with signatures and little carvings, so it would pass as a valuable present for someone close. Then I'd go back to the house and literally take whatever I wanted, but in a tidy, organized way. Yes, I stole, but the homeowners wouldn't notice easily. which gave me plenty of time to sell the loot at the secondhand market and even in public without fear. That's exactly what I did. But 3 days after that theft, I decided to go back to the same neighborhood for one last job. Then I'd head back to my city and share the spoils. When I entered the area, I found police officers everywhere and chaos inside the house where I'd stolen the statue. I thought they must have figured out who did it. So I changed my path and started watching the place from a distance. And then I noticed something strange. The homeowner had put up a huge painting with the exact same statue I had stolen. He handed that painting over to the police. I thought maybe that was the real treasure. The painting, how it looked like a cheap, ordinary piece, so I didn't bother with it. Another reason I left it behind was because it had that same statue drawn or printed on it somehow. The man stood beside the painting, proud, almost as if owning that statue meant something special. I couldn't make sense of it, but one thing was clear. Either the statue itself had great value to him, or the painting did. That's why he gave it to the police. Either way, I never really figured out what was going on. And indeed, the police left and the man went back inside his house. I determined to think outside the box. Since he has a painting for the statue itself must have been the real key. But how could I turn this situation to my advantage? And maybe even make some money out of it? After long hours of thinking, Syed finally struck gold. His golden idea, as he called it. Syed stepped into a shop and bought himself a formal suit and a tie, elegant enough to convince anyone he was a businessman. Dressed to perfection, he returned to the same neighborhood, executing a plan that left no room for error. With a notebook in one hand and a pen in the other, he looked sharp, confident, and entirely in control. He approached a young man nearby. The police were here a couple of days ago, weren't they? What happened exactly? The owner of that villa was traveling, the man explained. Something very valuable was stolen. Syed thanked him politely and walked on, every step measured, his eyes fixed on that villa. He knocked on the door. "Peace be upon you, and peace be upon you too. Who is it?" "My name is Syed," the man said, stepping into view. "I heard about the theft of your precious artifact, that rare treasure everyone spoke of. When I learned of it, I was deeply saddened. Losing something so unique, that's a tragedy money can't mend." As he spoke, Syed's tone carried both wisdom and empathy. He wasn't talking about gold or wealth. He was talking about value itself. The homeowner could feel it. This was no ordinary visitor. Syed was a man who measured life by meaning, not money. Syed said to the man, "I've heard you're one of those who truly appreciate rare antiques. I work in the field of rare collectibles, and I'd like to offer my help, no charge at all. What matters most is that the piece finds its way back to people who understand its true artistic value." The man was impressed by Syed's words and asked, "Do you have your own gallery or a company perhaps?" Syed smiled and replied, "No, I live like a wanderer. I travel the world, find extraordinary treasures, sell them, and then move on again. What I need from you is a description of the stolen piece. I have many contacts, businessmen, collectors, dealers. If the thief tries to sell it anywhere, rest assured, it will find its way back to you." The man was thrilled by the conversation and started describing the statue to the master thief. Its shape, the engraved seal, the signature, and the fact that it was made of pure gold. But the master interrupted him, saying, "Wait, does it have this and that?" He described the very same statue, the one he had actually stolen, down to the smallest detail. The man's eyes widened. "Yes, that's exactly the one." The master smirked. "That piece is extremely rare, a true masterpiece. You are lucky to own it once, and who knows, maybe luck will smile on you again." Syed walks out of the house, having planted a whole new personality inside the mind of the wealthy homeowner, who has no idea the masterpiece he owns is nothing but a fake. That means the rich man is clueless in this field, an easy prey for someone like Syed. Just 4 days, that's all he needs. He strikes a deal with a guy driving a fancy, fairly new car, take him to the villa for a fee, but dress sharp, suit and tie. Syed, of course, will be the one behind the wheel. A sleek car rolled to a stop in front of the grand villa. From it steps Syed, carrying a sealed wooden box in his hands. He walked straight to the door where the wealthy man awaited him. Syed handed him the box with a simple, calm voice. "Here you go, sir. This is yours. As for the thief, we've turned him over to the police." The man opened the box and froze in disbelief. The missing statue was there, untouched. He couldn't believe Syed's honesty. The man could have easily sold the priceless artifact for a fortune. Yet here it was, returned safely. In that moment, he realized Syed wasn't just an honest man, he was extraordinary. The rich man said, "Ask for anything you want, just say it, Syed." Syed chuckled and replied, "No need, sir. I've delivered the piece safely and that's all that matters. Just make sure you take good care of it. It's a masterpiece that's been around for decades." Of course, he was lying, trying to make the man believe he was a true expert in such treasures. Then he added, "Anyway, I must be going. I've got plenty of work to do. But if you ever want me to drop by when I find a truly rare and priceless piece, just let me know. I'll come to you before anyone else. I've got 4 other clients waiting for unique antiques, all competing to buy them from me." That was the snare Syed had set. He handed back the precious masterpiece, which was actually a worthless fake, asking for nothing in return. The bait was taken. The man trusted him completely, and that trust became Syed's gold mine. For 3 whole years, he sold him one fake artifact after another, 6 in total, crafted from copper, painted in gold, or sculpted from cheap stone. Each piece sold for a fortune, millions, for nothing but illusions. And here's the real shock, my friend. Syed took those millions and used them to help the locals who had always been like family to him. But that's when things started to change. One day, the wealthy man discovered through another antique dealer that every single piece Syed had sold him was fake. Even the statue he'd kept for himself was a forgery. It was all part of an elaborate, calculated scam. He rushed to the police, describing Syed with uncanny precision, every detail of his face, his body, and every mark that could help identify him. Soon after, those descriptions made their way into a local newspaper, and even onto TV. But fate had its own plans. It was 2011, the year Egypt erupted in the January 25th revolution. The media's attention was consumed by the chaos in the streets. While somewhere far from the spotlight, Syed was living a quiet, ordinary life. At 20, he had no ID, no official documents. People only knew him by one name, Syed. To everyone around him, he wasn't just a neighbor, he was a brother, always ready to help anyone in need. Back then, people were glued to the news, trying to catch every update about the revolution and what was happening in the country through newspapers and television. During those tense days, a photo flashed on TV, a face that looked strikingly like Syed's. Beneath it were the words, "Thief and fraudster, reward offered for his capture." His full name appeared, along with a list of charges and news of a prison sentence handed down in absentia. Anyone who recognized him could report him and claim the cash reward. If you believe no one managed to recognize Syed from that drawing in the newspaper, you couldn't be more mistaken. As the story spread, especially among his neighbors, people began calling him Syed the Thief. thief. He became, in no time, the most talked about man in the district. But none of them ever reported him. Not because they feared him, but because they admired him. The humble young man who robbed the rich, who treated money like dust, only to give every penny to the poor, who woke up hungry and went to bed without even a loaf of bread. As Syed himself once said, he lived safely among his people, family, and friends, who were ready to fight the government itself just to keep him free. And indeed, my friend, to this very day, Syed still walks free, famous under the name Syed the Thief. He has dozens of mothers, fathers, and brothers who treat him like one of their own, a true Robin Hood of the poor. But did his journey end once people discovered who he really was? Of course not. On the contrary, he continued, but in a different way. At the time, he was just 20, and though he was a thief, deep down he believed he was doing something good. He returned to Cairo and boldly expanded his operations, no longer fearing the authorities or the police. With a fake ID and a new name, he could finally move around without looking over his shoulder. And now that you've heard his story, you can probably tell, this young man, though a thief and a con artist who preyed on the rich, but deep inside, he was someone who couldn't stop helping those who had nothing. But that very kindness dragged him into a whirlwind of events he never saw coming, terrifying, mysterious, and utterly unpredictable. One of those strange incidents happened when Syed tried to rob a witch, specifically the witch of Shubra el Khema. Shubra el Khema is a well-known city, and it had a notorious witch famous for her dark tricks and sorcery. Syed the Thief decided to rob her, as it perfectly matched his own twisted principles. He only stole from the filthy rich, the ones who never appreciated their blessings. And since this witch was not just rich but wicked, he thought, why not? It would be an easy job and a guilt-free one. And indeed, he managed to find that witch, an old woman known as Haja Rabia. She was very old, almost as if time itself had forgotten her. Yet her dark powers drew in the wealthy and the famous, who visited her regularly for reasons no one dared to question. So Syed put on his finest suit and went to her house, posing as a businessman with a proposal, a secret deal that would bring her new clients seeking her magic in exchange for a cut of their money. Somehow, the witch actually believed him, and our guy managed to steal a ridiculous amount of money from her. That's when the nightmare began. A curse hit him, turning his life into pure horror. He ended up homeless, sleeping in graveyards, and even robbing the dead, literally just to deliver their remains to the witch. But that's a long story. I'm not sure you're ready for it, or for the story of Syed the Thief, whose life will leave you absolutely speechless. These stories are full of theft, horror, scams, and unbelievable twists. Honestly, I could make an entire series out of them. If you enjoyed this one and want to hear the rest, drop a comment below. And if most of you want me to keep telling the tales of Syed the Thief, I'll definitely continue. But for now, we've reached the end of today's episode. If you like this story, head over to my channel and check out the previous episodes. I promise, they're absolutely legendary and unlike anything you've ever heard before. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and share the video so you won't miss what's coming next. Follow me on Instagram to see my life outside of YouTube. I am Ali Ahmed. Goodbye. Hold on, guys, there's a bug. This bug has returned again. Should I kill it? Oh, really? Oh my God, really? By the grace of God, I won't let it go this time. It intruded into the room and flew over there. What is this? Anyway, for those asking where the bug is and why it happened, enough already it appeared in filming today. Remarkably, despite it being cold outside, I think the temperature is about 4 approximately, which is nice, okay? It's cold, but interestingly, bugs fly in the cold. You know what I mean. The upcoming weather forecast predicts 1 millimeter of the rain on Friday. Oh, it sounds good. Everything's fine. The wind always makes the weather feel colder, you know? Like, They say it's 0 degrees, but it feels like -5. Why not just say -5 then? I mean, what's the point of saying 0 if that's not what we actually feel? Honestly, this whole thing confuses me. I feel like the weather guys are messing with us. Hold on a second, dear viewers. Maybe I made a typo when I was writing the story. Let's check again. He was born in 1991, right? The same year the gas truck exploded. Okay, that checks out. In 2011, that would make him 20 years old. If we add 20 more years, yep, that's right. By 2011, he was 20. So now, if I said he's 34 in 2025, wait, that actually makes sense. 2025 minus 1991 equals 34. Wow, looks like the math checks out. Alright folks, forget what I said earlier. No typo after all. Let's move on with the story.